Hello, incredible English 105 students. Welcome to English 105 and some of the amazing things that you are going to be learning. One of my favorite parts about writing and the writing process is how this process empowers you to learn, to grow, to realize and become more than you were just before. And all it takes is the power of a single word. And that power, that's what we're going to be tapping into and exploring together. Now, I wanted to take you first and foremost on a tour through that power to demonstrate, to illustrate to you just how important language and your words are to everything you do and everything you become. Because we know that words matter. They're everything. The old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never harm me. Not quite true, especially in the digital age, because language is all that we are. It is our dreams, it is our reality, our past, present, and future. It is how we communicate information, it's how we build connections, it's how we define ourselves and make sense of the world around us. Words transform as they describe, they elevate, they transport, they communicate, they create. They're everything. Don't believe me? I want to prove it to you right now. And I want you to think of this important connection between words and ideas, because ideas are incredibly powerful. To quote Nolan from his amazing movie Inception, once an idea has taken a hold in the brain, it is almost impossible to eradicate. Ideas are incredible and ideas are contagious. They define us and our world in so many ways. And ideas are communicated through words, through language. If you have an idea, you are thinking about that idea using words. And if you want to make that idea a reality, you have to communicate it using words and language as a vehicle, a tool to connect and share information. So I'm going to demonstrate to you just how powerful those ideas are by taking you somewhere. I'm going to give you a word, and that word is going to instantly transport you somewhere else. So I want you to clear your mind of all distractions. And when you see the words on the next slide, I want you to go wherever they take you. And as you travel, take note of what you see, what you smell, what you hear, what you feel. Where did you go? Where and when were you? What memories come rushing back, and where does that word take you next? Feel free to reflect, pause, whatever you need to do. Stay as long as you'd like wherever you go, and then we'll come on back and dive back into our discussion. Are you ready? Words are powerful. Just a couple of words on the page can instantly change what you're thinking about, where you are, and even what you imagine, what you dream to be possible. Words are an incredibly powerful tool, and we have a responsibility to use that power wisely and with intention. And that's what English 105 is all about. Words are the foundation of what we think, what we do, what we are, and what we create in the world around us. And that doesn't just happen. We can take control over our language. We can decide what words we choose to use and when. We can evaluate the words of others, and we can choose to use language wisely to connect, to persuade, and to express. So you have the power to use language to communicate your ideas and information. You have the power to make choices and to have those choices dictate the impact your words have, how your audience sees you and your ideas as shaped by the words you choose to use. And we can use language wisely. We can decide what we want, our purpose, and we can use language as a tool to get us there. Now, there are two truths in our modern world that you have to keep in mind. First and foremost, someone knows something important that you don't know, and you know something important that they don't know yet. And it's this fantastic cycle that inspires innovation, growth, and possibility in our world. And this cycle is happening all the time, every single day. And research and writing empower you to participate actively in the creation of knowledge and in the actions that define our world, because someone knows something you don't know. So we can use research to tap into their knowledge and find and use that information, and you know something that they don't. And that means that writing empowers you to share your knowledge, ideas, and expertise with others. And that's how research and writing together empower all of us to keep growing and learning, and thus innovating and becoming more than we were yesterday. And you already do this every single day. You participate in this process. Why not participate in it more effectively, more consciously, more wisely, and with more intention? So if research and writing are things we do every day, well, why is it so difficult? There's a few reasons. The first and foremost is that the audience is always right, pun intended. And what that means is we always start writing, we start communicating because we have something to say. We have an idea to share. So we always start with my idea, me and mine. But at some point, it has to stop being about me and it has to start being about my audience, because I could have the most fantastic idea, the greatest words, the greatest book, the greatest essay. I could create the greatest song or movie script in the world. But if no one sees it, if no one reads it, if no one brings it to life, does it make an impact? The answer, unfortunately, is no. So at some point, it has to stop being about what I want to communicate, and it needs to be about my audience and what they need in order to understand. Purpose is also the measure of success. So writing itself isn't enough. We're not writing just to write. We're writing because there's something we want. There's something we need. There's an action we'd like our audience to take, some change we'd like to happen as a result of this communication. And it's that purpose that determines our success. Platforms also have their own rules, and we know this. We know that a text message is a bit different from an email, which has different expectations from Twitter or Facebook, which has different expectations from your college English composition course. Every platform has different rules that we're expected to abide by. And it's important that we learn those rules so we can follow them and use those platforms to their full advantage. We also, to write well, have to admit what we don't know. And no one likes doing this. We like to pretend that we know everything, but the truth is we don't. We have questions. There are things that we've never done before, things that we may be uncertain about. And we oftentimes start research because we don't know something, and we're using research as a tool to learn more, to move from I don't know to I have knowledge to let me share my knowledge via writing with you. And we also have to admit that we don't always know the rules of a platform we're using. We don't always know our audience as well as we would like to. We may not know everything about a topic that we're writing about. And in order for us to go through the writing and research process, we first have to be honest with ourselves and admit, what don't we know? And where do we need to go to get the information we need to be able to move forward with confidence? And in that movement forward, we have to remember that it's a process. No one just sits down and writes something. It's a process. We've got to earn the knowledge. We have to plan it all out. And then we have to go through a process of drafting and revision. And that process takes time. And here's the thing I love about the writing process is as you go through it, you get to learn more. And as you learn more about your topic, your platform, your audience, you're also learning more about yourself. You're changing throughout that process. And that process is the gift. Writing is just a very happy, fortunate accident of going through this process of gaining so much knowledge, learning so much, gaining so much insight that all that's left is to shout what you've learned from the rooftops. So it's the process that we engage in. It's the process that we seek. It's the journey that makes it worthwhile, not just the end result. A great way to think of this is, let's say that you were climbing a mountain, right? If you could just teleport to the top, it might be nice, but you would miss all the good stuff in the middle. And that stuff in the middle is what gets you there. It's what makes the journey meaningful and worthwhile. Think about this with your degree as well. We could just fast forward to being handed your diploma, but you'd miss something if you didn't go through all the classes, all the steps. You wouldn't have the knowledge, you wouldn't have the experience or the expertise, you wouldn't have earned it. And the writing and research are the exact same way. Learning is a process of discovery, and we can't just skip the learning, the stuff in the middle that makes that final product worthy, earned, meaningful. But I think more than anything, writing can be a little intimidating because it demands that we do something that scares us, and it demands that we make mistakes. It demands that we fail. It demands that we take on a challenge knowing that we're going to try and try again, that it's not going to be perfect, that we're going to make mistakes. And those mistakes are a part of the process. They're actually welcome things, that we're never going to have an idea and communicate it perfectly the first time it hits the page. We're going to have to try, make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, get some feedback, and try again. And that's because writing, like anything that's worthwhile, demands perseverance, a willingness to make the mistakes that are necessary for us to learn and grow. It means abandoning perfection for the journey that gets you to where you'd like to be. And this journey towards success, the importance of perseverance that is taught and nurtured throughout the writing process, we see it all throughout our world and culture. We see it in the success of people who never gave up, who saw mistakes as important learning opportunities and pursued those learning opportunities and then proved everyone wrong. They transformed challenges into opportunities, and in doing so, realized more than they could ever imagine. These examples right here are just a few. Take a look at some of your favorite. Take a look at your mentors, your rock stars, your superheroes, the people that you look up to. I guarantee you what defined their success was not just talent. It was not luck. It was perseverance. It was their willingness to commit to a process, to make the mistakes necessary, to learn from those mistakes, and to see it through to the end. And that's exactly what you're going to learn as you navigate the writing process. So what is the writing and research process? Well, it involves a few different steps where we learn every step along the way. The first is to build a foundation, and I call this APP or TAP. And that is, we need to know our topic, what we're writing about. We need to know our audience, who we're writing to. We need to know our purpose, why we're doing this in the first place. And we need to know our platform, that is where this communication is going to take place. And once we know those things, we got to think about it. This is also called brainstorming. We've got to develop some ideas. We've got to explore what those ideas might be and all of their possibilities. We've got to think. And then we've got to gather more knowledge. We've got to conduct some initial research to learn more about our topic, our audience, our purpose, and yes, even our platform. And knowledge begets more knowledge, so we've got to learn even more about these things. We've got to learn as much as we possibly can. We have to know before we have something to share. We've got to gather the knowledge, earn that knowledge before we can share what we think about that knowledge with our audience and develop new ideas. And once you've learned as much as you can, once you've gathered the knowledge that we currently have, and you've used that to develop your own ideas and arguments, the next step is to plan, to outline, to try to take all of those ideas and evidence and plan how it all fits together. What's your big point? What are the ideas that support it? And what's the evidence that's going to back you up? An outline is forming a map, a plan of how you're going to express all you've done and learned to your audience. And then we draft. And note it says draft, not write, because draft is just taking the ideas with your map, your outline in hand, and throwing words on the page and seeing what sticks. It's playing with language. It's seeing how it all fits together. It's negotiating it. It's seeing what happens. It's an opportunity to make mistakes, try things out, see what works, see what doesn't, and then start writing. It's just diving in. And then once you've got words on the page, we can start working with it. And that working is revision and editing. Revision and editing are where you make the big and small changes that allow your ideas to truly shine. And you can't write, you can't revise and edit in your brain. It can only happen on the page. Think about it this way. Eventually, paint has got to hit the canvas before a painter knows what they've got and can start working with it. Eventually, clay has got to hit the wheel if we're going to start sculpting. If you are creating music, eventually you've got to start making notes. If you play sports, at some point you've got to just dive in and pick up the ball and start throwing it around, right? You can't just do it in your head. You can't just imagine it. And writing is the same way. You've got to get content out onto the page, messy as it might be, and then you know what you've got to work with and you can start working with it. You can revise to make it clearer and stronger, and you can edit to make it more polished. And that is the writing process. Now, the other thing I like about the writing process is it gives us an opportunity to use our whole selves, our whole minds. Some of us are going to favor a certain aspect of our skills and natural talents and personality. We might be a little more creative. We might be a little bit more logical, right? We all have different strengths and gifts. But throughout the writing process, there's space for you to bring your whole self. There's space for you to be very creative, like when you're brainstorming, but there's also space for you to be very logical. There's space where you get to be very curious, like when you're researching, but there's also space to be very analytical and precise. There's space to think really big picture, and there's space to think about all the little details. You get the opportunity to be passionate about your ideas and purpose, but you also get a chance to be very disciplined and objective and focused on your audience. The writing process allows you to use your whole mind and to shift between these important skills and perspectives so you can create and communicate ideas that represent your whole self and the whole self you become throughout that fantastic journey. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't encounter challenges as you navigate the writing and research process. In fact, it's one of the big things you'll be learning about in English 105 are the challenges that you might face in the digital age. Research is important because research is how we gather the knowledge needed in order to have something to say. And in our digital world, information is literally everywhere. We're creating more information every single day than existed from the dawn of man up until present day. Right? That's how much information we create every day. Billions, if not trillions, of pieces of information published, created, and shared for the world to see. So if information is everywhere, that's a great thing. But the negative thing about that is information is everywhere, which means it's really hard to find exactly what you're looking for. In a world where trillions of pieces of information are being created every single day, how do you work with that? How do you shift through that? How do you make it all make sense? When you type an answer into Google or type a question into Google and get 3 billion potential information sources back, well, how do you even begin to navigate that? That's a challenge that we've got to figure out how to navigate together. We also need to think about things like the filter bubble, that what we like is not necessarily what we need. And in our digital world, there's a lot of focus on giving you information that reinforces what you already know. There's algorithms that track the websites you like to visit, your personal preferences, the things that you've clicked on, the things that you've liked on social media. And in return, it's going to give you more of those things. Perhaps the best example of this, if you have a streaming service like Netflix, you might notice that the recommended movies on your homepage are different from someone else's because the system is paying attention to the movies and shows you watch, and it wants to give you more of the same. But if you don't get outside of your comfort zone, if you don't challenge yourself to look at different points of view, you might miss something. That's the filter bubble, this bubble of what we like that surrounds us all the time. And if we don't take steps to break free of that bubble, we might miss the opportunity to learn from a different point of view. We might miss the opportunity to take off our blinders and see a bigger picture and perhaps even from a different perspective. Another challenge is misinformation and fake news. Anyone, anywhere can publish anything, and that's amazing. But if anyone anywhere can publish anything, that also increases the odds of interacting with information that's not accurate, information that might be fake, or information that might be very biased and isn't giving you a broad perspective. So we need to be able to distinguish opinion from fact, especially in this era of information. And we have to challenge ourselves to really think, how do we know it's true? Just because it's published online, just because it's shared on social media, doesn't mean it's true. A great way to think of this: 90% of statistics online are made up. How do you know that I made that up? Did I make it up? It's very possible. So we have to ask ourselves constantly, just because someone said something, just because the information is there online, doesn't mean it's actually true. And we've got to navigate misinformation. We've got to evaluate information. We've got to decide for ourselves, is this worthy of my trust? And we also have to consider relevance. I'm sure you've been there. You've been looking for something on Google, then you get distracted by something else. And before you know it, you're wandering into cat videos on YouTube, right? There's so much information everywhere. And in some weird way, it all connects. But when we're looking for an answer to a question, or we're really looking closely at a topic that matters to us, we have to constantly ask ourselves, yes, this is interesting, but does it actually help me? Is it going to help me learn what I need to learn in order to satisfy my purpose? And these are the challenges that we are going to learn how to navigate together. Because if we learn how to use keywords effectively and tap effectively to navigate information overload, if we learn how to actively search for different points of view, maintain an objective mind, and evaluate our sources so we can see the big picture as opposed to the little piece that we already like, and if we can encourage and enable and empower ourselves to ask hard questions, be skeptical, and hold our sources of information to a high standard to say, how do you know that's true? And if they can't tell you, move on to the next source. And of course, to evaluate our sources and to use that information within the foundation and framework of our purpose, our audience, and our goals. Well, you're going to be able to not only overcome these challenges, but you're going to be able to write and research with confidence. And I promise you, this is something that you already know how to do. Now, to learn more, be sure to check out our fantastic bonus recorded lecture that you can find right here. And if you have any questions or need any support navigating challenges of research in the digital age, all you have to do is reach out to your instructor. Happy writing, happy researching, and happy learning.